The IAEA is expected to hold urgent talks on preventing nuclear incidents and how to tighten oversight. A top concern is the safekeeping of nuclear materials, especially in war zones. In its 2024 Nuclear Safety Review, the agency reported a surge in global demand for help with nuclear safety, security and safeguards. But with rising inflation and energy costs, the proposed 2026 to 27 budget aims for a zero real growth, which means having to do more with less. The meeting also follows fresh US sanctions on Iran's oil trade. In response, Iran has warned Europe, saying reimpose sanctions and lose it all. It says the UK, Germany and France have no legal or moral right to bring back penalties lifted under the 2015 nuclear deal. Let's cross now to Vienna and speak to Yousef Alshammari, who's at the conference now. He's president of the London College of Energy Economics. It's good to see you, Yousef. Now, what risks do unsecured nuclear materials pose to global markets?
Hello, and very pleased to speak to TRT. Well, of course, with the rise in demand, as you've just mentioned, for nuclear power, that will bring multiple tasks for the agency and to implement and widen the scope of international safeguards. Essentially, the safeguard agreement is it's for any country that has signed the NPT, which is Non-Proliferation Treaty, back in the 90s and in fact the 80s. It puts an effort or a mandate for any country to ensure that these materials are not being used for the non-peaceful applications. And I believe this is the major task of the agencies, to ensure that all the use of nuclear power is maintained for peaceful purposes. But of course, we have seen multiple concerns, especially from programs, for example, the one in Iran or Northern Korea and some other countries, whereby there's a lack of transparency. And I believe if, of course, here we're talking, of course, with some, let's say, a little deviation from the international safeguards. But if we're talking about 70 gigawatt that is currently under construction in more than 40 countries, then essentially it means that we're going to ensure that stringent safeguards is being widened, especially for newcomers, those countries who including nuclear power into their energy mix, including countries in fact in Africa, in China, in India, and multiple emerging economies. So I believe it comes both in hand, whereby if you need nuclear power, you definitely need to ensure that the nuclear program is primarily and fully used for a peaceful purpose.
Right, and can the agency deliver on these demands with a flat budget?
Well, I believe 100%. That is the major goal of the agency since its foundation more than 60 years ago. But of course, it requires resources. And I believe here you have multiple and some of the biggest donating countries to the agency, including the United States, whether it's Russia, whether it's in fact France, and multiple of the major economies which are permanent members of the Security Council. Of course, even some other emerging economies, from whether it's the Middle East or Asia. Yet, I do believe that it's not really an economic issue, rather than an international agreements issue when it comes to inspection. And I believe this is a major goal for the agencies, to ensure that there is a clear understanding between those countries who need to achieve its development agenda and the international protocols that they have to comply with. I believe in multiple cases we see this interaction coming quite well, but also in some cases we see a bit of lack of cooperation. And I just say here, for example, the Iranian case, for example, where the agency has not been enabled access to all the sites. And I believe this definitely raised security concerns for the international community.
Right, and is nuclear power still a viable clean energy investment for the future?
Well, it looks like it's getting much more attention than it used to be, and we heard from the Director General of the agency just yesterday that development banks, including, for example, World Bank, back in the days, they used to not fund projects with the world in nuclear energy or nuclear energy projects. So clean nuclear was not classified as part of the global development goals. But now we're seeing a shift in the policy. Now development banks are starting to fund the nuclear power, and I believe there's here a reason because, as you can see, there is a huge surging demand for power for AI applications, and that means we need to provide sustainable power. So that power will come either from natural gas, which is the primarily used fuel, and secondly, nuclear power. Of course, also we have some stringent targets with the climate, and we need to achieve net zero emissions or maybe close to zero emissions by 2050. And if we're going to exclude nuclear or not make the full use of nuclear energy, then we're truly going to put a huge burden on renewables and fossil fuels,
Right.
and that means the cost will be compromised as well as the environmental consequences.
Right, Yousef Alshammari, President of the London College of Energy Economics. Thank you very much for speaking to us today. Well, that is